Hey gang, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of Intuitive Angling, and thanks for checking out the video today, much appreciated. Guys, today we're gonna have sort of a wide-ranging discussion on the topic of there's a fine line between success and failure in fishing, and I wanna really discuss what that fine line is because it's something that it has driven me crazy over the past 40 years bass fishing, and I wanna sort of explain to you what that is and some things that you can do to maybe put it in your advantage a little bit more, because man, fishing, if you guys have fished long enough, you know it can be so easy sometimes, and then other times it can be impossible. Seems like it's impossible, and there's usually just some minute little difference that makes all the world of difference. So we're going to get into that. And real quick, guys, before we get started, just wanted to remind everybody, invite you to consider becoming a channel member here of Intuitive Angling. And as a channel member, you get 2 extra videos a week that aren't seen by the public, just made specifically for members only, and some access to my personal email address for your fishing questions. So if you're interested in that, on my YouTube homepage, Intuitive Angling, just click the little join button, and that gives you the info on everything we have going there. So much appreciated. Okay guys, bass fishing, it's one of the things I always talk about in the sport is that bass fishing is the most difficult, complicated sport in the world, period. And it is a sport, make no doubt about it. It's just as much of a sport as any other sport that there is. The difference between bass fishing and other sports is the level of difficulty involved in it, to master it. Because in bass fishing, you have an unlimited amount of controlled variables and uncontrolled variables. Now, the controlled variables being things like, you know, your equipment choices and where you decide to fish out on the lake, and you know, stuff like that you have a hand in. Uncontrolled variables can be something like the weather or fishing pressure or something like that. And there's literally a never-ending list of variables that go into that, because in the bass fishing end of it, just the controlled variables you have everything from lure profile, lure size, lure color, the cadence and retrieve you put on the lure, how the line size or the type of line affects the action of the lure, how the rod and the rod tip action and the wrist action you put on the lure affects generating strikes or not, boat angles, casting angles, you know, noise within the boat. It just goes on and on and on. You could write a book on just the control variable part of it. And normally what happens in bass fishing, when I'm talking about that fine line between success and failure, it's usually not much at all as far as what allows one angler to have a good day on the water and the next angler to struggle. Now, I'll reference, even if you guys don't fish tournaments, you can probably learn something from this, because a lot of my learning ground and my references that I have in bass fishing has come through my tournament experiences. Because the great thing about tournament bass fishing in terms of learning is it forces you to learn quickly, because you have something on the line with that, and you're pushed to learn quicker. And for the most part, here is one of the things I've always thought about. It's like, what is it that separates the average professional bass angler that maybe, say, gets a check in half of the tournaments, and then that bass angler out there that just is in the top 10 every year? And I've seen this throughout my career. There'll be like maybe 3 to 5% of the overall field that just, they're heads and shoulders above everyone else. It's like those 5% of the anglers, they're simply in a different league than everybody else, and for a lot of different reasons. It can be something about they don't have the financial distraction, you know, they've had more time on the water, they have more resources, you know, they've got everything clicking on all 8 cylinders, where somebody else may have a lot more challenges that affects that. But what happens is the other 95% of those anglers out there, they're the ones that are always fighting for that piece of the pie of just making a check. But there's a fine line between being one of those people that are struggling every tournament to get a check versus the people that win tournaments and consistently are in the top 10. But the thing about it is there's not much daylight between the two of them, because here's the difference. It's like, I've always thought that bass fishing is changing right now to the level where there's not much difference between, say, a BFL level angler, which is considered like a weekend circuit, and like the Bassmaster Elite Series. In my opinion, the level of competition is about the same. I mean, and people are going to say, oh, how can you say that, Randy? How do you know? I know because I've lived it for 35 years. You could take the top 30 anglers in any BFL division and put them in the Elite Series, and they would do as good as anyone else in the Elite Series out there. But the problem, the issue that we're talking about as far as the fine line between success and failure, this is what I mean by that. And I'll just use a couple different techniques. Let's say topwater fishing. Now, say for example, you're fishing in the fall time of the year and you think there's going to be a topwater bite. Now, you've got a big selection of topwaters to choose from. You got chuggers, you got walking baits, you got buzzer type baits, you got horny toad type baits, a lot of different models and makes of topwater lures. But let's just say, for example, you've decided to throw buzz bait, and your favorite buzz bait is a half ounce white buzz bait with a gold blade, something like that. Now, the next person out there, say he decides to throw buzz bait too, but he goes to like a 3/8 ounce model with some type of a bluegill pattern skirt on it. Maybe it's like an orange and chartreuse and green, something resembles a bluegill. And they may have different types of water they're fishing. You may be fishing flat points, the other guy may be fishing the back end of coves, but nevertheless, you're both fishing a buzzbait. Now, at times, one of those anglers may throw the buzzbait all day long and not catch a fish, and then the other angler may go out and win the tournament on the same lure because they've hit upon, and usually it is just by coincidence and random, good fortune, they've hit upon that variable that for that time and place during that day that those fish were reacting to. Let's say, for example, the guy that went with the bluegill pattern skirt with like a silver blade, for whatever it was, the light intensity, the water clarity, the water level, everything combined, there was something about that setup that those bass really keyed in on. And if that same buzzbait would come through there like the other person throwing the white buzzbait with a gold blade, the squeak may have been different, the profile may have been different, the color of it may have looked just a little bit different in the water and the sunlight conditions, and they wouldn't bite it. But again, there's a fine line between hitting on that right color like that. Now, I'll use another example here. The tournament I just got done at Lake of the Ozarks up there. I mean, the jig that I was flipping, my Block It Old School jig that I was flipping, the black and blue, I experimented with a couple different trailers. And finally, I was going to like some black and blues and some green pumpkins, but finally I put some chartreuse on my trailer, on the end of the trailer. And for whatever reason, that little chartreuse, that little bit of puff of chartreuse, the fish reacted to it, and I wound up catching probably 30 fish on it, and I wasn't getting a bite on a trailer of any other color. That's just a fine line between success and failure, just that color with that. So the question is what can you do? What can you do to make sure that fine line between success and failure lands on success and not failure? And a lot of it, guys, it's experimentation. And it's being open-minded enough to try different stuff as far as approaches and techniques if something's not working. Now, let's say, for example, we'll go back to the buzzbait story. Say, for example, you go to the lake and you're committed to throwing a buzzbait. And you start out throwing a half-ounce white buzzbait and you're not doing any good. Instead of putting the buzzbait down, make a switch. Go to a different color. Go to a different size of buzzbait. Go to a different blade size. Change up your retrieve. Put like some plastic trailer on the back of your skirt. Make some adjustment. And then once you make that adjustment, if that's not working, don't give up on the buzzbait, just change your areas. Instead of fishing rocky banks that have rock this big on it, go to a rocky bank that has rock that big on it. Go to a different angle of bank. Go to a different part of the lake that has a different water clarity. That is how you make something work that you're committed to. And that's the difference between those top level anglers and the other anglers that just struggle from time to time. And it's not as easy as it sounds. If it was that easy, everybody would do it and make that adjustment. But ultimately, guys, bass fishing is all about decisions. And if you make the right decisions in bass fishing, everything clicks, everything flows, it looks like you know what you're doing. But if you happen not to make the right decision, and you don't know when you make that decision if it's right or not, there's only time will tell. A lot of times you look like you're clueless and you don't know what you're talking about or what you're doing. But it doesn't matter. As your evolution as a bass angler progresses throughout your life, even if you had, even at some point you were at the top of your game. Like in my example here, I was at the top of my game from about 1998 to 2005. That was my day in the sun when everything was clicking. And even though my tournament results now are not near what they were back then, I am still a better angler now than I was back then. I know more about bass fishing. Everything that I knew back in 1998 to 2005, I know more than that now. I still know that stuff, but I still know more of it. And so don't ever, get to the point where you think that, you're just too old to learn, or, the techniques that you use are passing you by, because it doesn't make any difference the results you have in angler. You're getting better every single day, and you'll continue to get better every single day as you assimilate and, have that store of information to relate to. So anyway, guys, just a few thoughts on that. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk later.